I am Joryn Pike. I am talking into a cheap microphone in a storage room that smells of de-icing fluid and old coffee, inside Bangor International Airport in Bangor, Maine. If you are hearing this, it means the power is still on in this corner. The little backup battery is still holding and nobody has found me yet. I am not a reporter. I'm not military. I move bags for a living. I drive a tug. I load cargo. I toss strollers into bellies of planes. And I listen to international news podcasts to make the day go faster. That is it. I am a normal guy with a normal job. And I'm only talking now because the news stopped matching reality and I cannot stand it. I am not a conspiracy guy. I do not think every weird thing is a secret plot. I do not post grainy videos of lights in the sky. I do not collect canned beans. I have a hobby blog that tracks military airlift call signs and unusual flights because it scratches my brain in the right place. Patterns, details, timelines. I started it years ago because Bangor gets a mix of stuff most people do not notice. We get passenger flights, cargo, medical, private jets. And we also get military traffic coming through because this airport can handle it. Maine has a refueling wing right here. Tankers go up and down the coast all the time. Sometimes a big transport lands, people stretch their legs, fuel goes in, fuel goes out. It is boring until it is not. On my breaks, I listen to the same few shows. One is a straight news roundup with clips from Europe. Another is a security podcast that does not do screaming headlines. It does calm analysis, the kind that admits what it does not know. I started noticing something that should have felt normal and did not. The official alliance press statements from different capitals, in different languages, had the same structure down to the pauses. Not the meaning, the pauses. The same breath breaks in the same spots. If you read enough transcripts, you start hearing the rhythm. It is a weird thing to notice, and I know how it sounds. It still happened. I would listen to a statement from Brussels in English, then hear the German version, then the French, then a clipped version, read by an anchor in Washington, and the breaks landed in the same places. The same soft reset after the same sentence, the same "we remain committed" line placed in the same slot. At first I told myself it was normal. One central office writes it, everyone translates it, anchors read it from a teleprompter. That is how organizations work. Then I heard the exact same phrasing show up in statements that were not supposed to be coordinated. Separate leaders, separate schedules, separate countries, and still the same word choice. Not close, exact. It was not a quote. It was not attribution. It was just identical. I pulled the transcripts and lined them up on my phone in the break room, with my gloves still on, and I started marking them in my notes app. Same adjectives, same order. Same careful avoidance of naming what happened. Every statement talked about a developing situation and ongoing consultations and strategic clarity. Nobody said what the situation was. Nobody said who did what. They talked around a hole in the middle of the story. Then came the first hard break that I could point to on a calendar. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are my early shift. I clocked in at 4:30 in the morning, grabbed the belt loader keys, and went straight into loading a regional jet that was leaving before sunrise. Around 6:15, I had one earbud in under my beanie and I heard the phrase "emergency session" said in a calm voice. The podcast host said it once, paused, then repeated it slower. Emergency session. Closed doors, senior representatives. A question was asked right after, the one question everyone wanted answered, and the feed cut. Not a glitch, not a stutter. It cut clean into a pre-recorded music loop. Soft instrumental filler, the sort of thing that plays under weather or graphics. It ran for almost 4 minutes. Then the host came back with a different tone and moved on to a story about a celebrity divorce. I stood there, in the belly of the plane, holding a luggage tag in my hand, and my stomach turned cold. A clean cut to filler music is not an accident. Somebody pushes a button for that. Somebody has a plan for what happens next. When I got back to the break room, I checked 3 other sources. Same pattern. Announcement of something serious. Sudden pivot. Smiling anchor. No follow-up. A careful, clean, coordinated refusal to talk about the thing that had just been raised. I went home after my shift, and I did what I always do when I cannot let go of something. I opened my laptop and pulled archived video clips, transcripts, and press releases. I started comparing timestamps. The timeline did not add up. That week, there was supposed to be a joint exercise. Everyone knew about it because it was public. Ships, aircraft, troops moving around, a show of routine readiness. It got postponed due to logistical adjustments. 2 days later, the press releases stopped calling it postponed and started calling it rescheduled. Then the exercise disappeared from official calendars without a cancellation notice. The media stopped asking. The Alliance office stopped taking questions. Leaders appeared on separate podiums in separate countries, always alone, never together, each saying the same safe lines about unity and miscommunication. Miscommunication was the new magic word. Miscommunication about what? Miscommunication between whom? Nobody said. I'm going to say something that will sound small. It mattered because it was the first local thing. On Thursday night at around 9 in the evening, my supervisor, Carla, texted the group chat asking if anyone could cover a late arrival on the cargo side. It was not in the schedule. Special, she wrote. Special arrivals happen. Charter teams, sports teams, sometimes a medical thing. I took it because overtime is overtime. I drove in with my hoodie up, rain hitting the windshield, and the ramp was quiet. No passengers, no carts moving. Just the steady hum of ground power units and a light haze of mist under the floodlights. A plane rolled in that I did not recognize from any airline list. No logo, no bright colors. Just a plain gray fuselage and a tail with only the minimum markings. It did have markings because it has to, but it was the kind that does not tell you anything at a glance. No obvious operator. No big company name. It parked far from the terminal out by the side where our normal baggage crew does not work. Carla put me and 2 other guys in a van and told us to stand by. She did not give a job description. She just said, do what you are told. Keep your head down. 2 local police cruisers rolled up, lights off. Not state troopers. Not federal marked vehicles. Just local. Then a white SUV I did not recognize. 4 people got out in plain clothes. No uniform patches visible. All business. The rear cargo door of the plane opened and a pallet came down on the loader. Sealed cases, not luggage, not mail, cases with clamps and serial stickers. Hard plastic, the kind you see for sensitive gear. A cop stood close enough that I could see his breath. One of the plainclothes guys pointed at our van and waved us back farther, with a flat palm, no words. The cases came off, got moved straight into a box truck that had no company branding. 10 minutes, maybe less. Then the cargo door closed, and the plane pushed back and left. No passengers walked downstairs. Nobody looked around. No wave. Nothing. Carla told us to go home. One of the guys, Jason, made a joke about alien bodies. Carla did not laugh. Carla took Jason aside and spoke to him in a low voice. Then she came to me and said, Joryn, do not blog about this. Do not even write it down. You did not see it. You understand me. Carla is not dramatic. Carla is the person who reminds you to fill out your injury forms and wear ear protection. Hearing her talk that way made my mouth go dry. I nodded, and I went home, and I did not sleep. I did write it down. I wrote it down because that is who I am. I made a new folder on my laptop and named it something boring. I saved the date and time. I described the plane. I described the cases. I did not post it. I kept it. The next morning I went back through open flight tracking logs. A lot of military flights do not show up cleanly. That is normal. Still, you can sometimes see hints. A call sign appears on a local air traffic feed. A route gets filed. A transponder pops on for a minute. I caught a brief entry that lined up with the arrival and departure window. A call sign that I had seen before in connection with government charters. Not proof, not a smoking gun, just another breadcrumb. Over the next week, the absence grew. Airlines started quietly trimming routes due to operational needs. Fuel trucks showed up late. Catering deliveries stopped coming on the usual days. People in town started posting photos of empty shelves again. Not full panic, just weird gaps. Pet food gone in one aisle, but cereal still there. The kind of pattern that tells you trucks are being rerouted, not that the whole system died. I listened to the news every night and heard nothing that matched what I was seeing. Leaders kept smiling. Press secretaries kept using the same words. Miscommunication, coordination, confidence. Then the treaty clause happened. A clause got invoked without anyone saying what triggered it. This is where I need to be careful with language and still be precise. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has articles. There is Article 4, which is consultation, basically a member saying we have a security concern, we need to talk. There is Article 5, which is collective defense, the big one that everybody knows. When something serious happens, you normally hear the reason in the same breath. We are invoking Article 4 because of X. This time, the statement came out saying a member had requested consultations under Article 4. It did not name the incident, it did not name the location. It did not name any adversary. It said recent developments. That was all. People shrugged online. Commentators filled airtime with speculation. Then the platforms flooded with reassuring maps. Bright, clean maps showing borders and arrows and a big stamp that said everything was stable. The maps were wrong in ways that made no sense. Wrong flags, wrong bases, mislabeled cities. I saw the same map posted by hundreds of new accounts within an hour. My blog, which normally got maybe a few hundred hits a day from aviation nerds, spiked to tens of thousands. My comment section filled with bots. I am not using that word casually. Bots, identical phrases, broken English. Some pushing panic, some pushing reassurance, all of it designed to drown out any real discussion. One of them posted my home address. Not directly. He posted a screenshot of a property record with my name highlighted. I called my best friend Mike Donahue. Mike is a United States Coast Guard reservist. He is also the guy who helped me move apartments. The guy who makes chili that can feed 10 people. The guy who still texts me about the Patriots even when the Patriots are a mess. Mike drills out of South Portland. He works a normal civilian job during the week. I called him because he lives closer to real operations than I ever will, and because I needed a human voice that was not an anchor reading a script. Mike answered on the second ring and did not say hello the usual way. He said, "Talk fast." I asked him if he had heard anything about the Alliance situation. Mike got quiet. Then he said something that made my throat tighten. He said his unit got 3 mobilization orders in one day. 3. One at 0700 telling him to report for a standard weekend drill, nothing unusual. Then another at 11:30 in the morning telling him to prepare for immediate activation for port security support. Then another at 1600 canceling activation and instructing all reservists to stand by for further notice. Mike said the orders came from different chains of command. He said officers were arguing in the hallway about which one was valid. He said nobody wanted to put anything in writing. He said even the people in charge looked confused. Mike told me one more thing, and this is the part I cannot prove with paperwork. I only have his voice and my memory. He said the word from someone higher up was that coordination agreements are under review. He did not say more because he did not want to get himself in trouble. He did not say North Atlantic Treaty Organization. He did not say article anything. He just said coordination agreements. Then he said, "Joryn, stop posting. Stop. You are painting a target on yourself for no reason." I did not stop. I did scale back. I locked down my blog. I deleted old posts that had personal details. I changed passwords. I started saving everything offline. I bought a cheap external hard drive at a big box store, and I copied my archives to it. I started recording the news every night. Not because I thought the news was true, but because I wanted a record of what people were told. I wanted to be able to point later and say, on this night, at this time, this anchor said this exact sentence, and here is what was happening on the ground at the same time. A week after the unmarked plane, I noticed something else at work. The tankers. When the refueling wing is active, you hear it even if you are not watching. The roar is different. The climb is heavier. The pattern repeats. For years, I could tell by ear when the refueling wing had a busy day. That week, the pattern shifted. Fewer training loops, more direct climbs, higher, faster departures. More late-night engine runs, more vehicles on the military side. I asked one of the guys who works closer to that area, a guy named Reggie, who has been here since the early 2000s, if something was going on. Reggie looked at me for a long second and said, "They told us not to talk." Reggie did not mean Carla. Reggie meant somebody above Carla. I started monitoring open channels more, not hacking, not anything fancy. I have a scanner. A lot of people do. I listen to what any hobbyist can listen to. I heard pilots requesting refuel clearances and getting rerouted. Not just once. Over and over. A pilot would ask for a tanker rendezvous on a published track and the controller would tell him to hold, then tell him to proceed direct to a different point, then there would be a gap. Sometimes the pilot would come back frustrated, voice tight, asking again, then silence. I am not claiming every silence meant disaster. Radios go quiet for a lot of reasons. Still, the whole tone changed. Less routine, more clipped, more stand by. The news kept pretending everything was normal. A smiling anchor did a segment about summer travel tips while I watched a line of military trucks roll through a restricted gate at the airport. A government spokesperson said all alliance mechanisms remain fully intact, while another country's defense ministry announced it was reviewing participation frameworks. Participation frameworks. That phrase showed up in 3 languages in one day, again with the matching pauses, again with the same safe structure. I started to understand what was happening, not as a single dramatic event, but as a coordinated decision to avoid saying the truth out loud. Here is what I think the decision was, based on everything I saw and heard. Someone inside the Alliance leadership believed that admitting the Alliance was cracking would cause faster collapse. So the leadership tried to hold the shape together by refusing to acknowledge the cracks. That sounds reasonable on paper. In real life, it creates a different problem. It teaches everyone that the official voice is not describing reality. Once people learn that, they stop trusting even the parts that are true. It got personal for me in a stupid, simple way. My sister Erin lives overseas. Erin is not military, not political. She works in a restaurant and she went over there because she wanted a different life than small-town Maine. We talk once a week. Suddenly, her messages started arriving late, then not arriving at all. I would get a batch of old texts at 3 a.m, out of order, with weird timestamps. Erin called me one night and her voice kept cutting. She said trains were delayed. She said the grocery store had a line that went around the block. She said the local news was telling people to stay calm because no hostile action has occurred. She sounded tired. She sounded scared. She asked me if she should come home and I had no honest answer. In Bangor, life did not look like war. It looked like stress. It looked like people snapping at each other in parking lots. It looked like an airport manager doing meetings behind closed doors. It looked like new security protocols that arrived with no explanation. One morning I came in and the badge reader at an access door flashed red. I tried again. Red. A security guard I know, a guy named Pete, who usually jokes with everyone, walked up and told me to use the main corridor only. He did not explain why. He looked embarrassed. I asked him if my badge was deactivated and he said, "It is temporary." Then he added, "Do not make a scene." I went straight to Carla's office. Carla did not look up from her screen. She said, "Joryn, I cannot fix this." I asked her who told her to do it. Carla finally looked at me and her face had that tight look people get when they are trying not to show fear. She said, "Somebody called from the airport authority. Somebody I do not know. Somebody with a calm voice who said it was for operational safety. He told me you post things online and you have been asking questions." She leaned forward and said, "Stop. You have a job. Do not throw it away over a hobby." I did not yell. I did not punch a wall. I nodded and walked out and my hands were shaking. I had always believed that if you did nothing wrong, you had nothing to worry about. I learned that week that you can be treated as a problem just because you notice things. Not because you broke a law, not because you hurt anyone, because you pay attention. That night, my blog got hit again. Not just bots. Somebody tried to log into my email. Somebody tried to reset passwords on my bank account. Somebody ordered a phone under my name and tried to ship it to an address in another state. I spent hours on hold with customer service, repeating the same lines, proving I was me. I slept in short bursts on the couch with my laptop open. Around 2 a.m, I heard a car outside my apartment building. I looked through the blinds and saw a sedan idling with headlights off. After a minute, it drove away. Could have been nothing. It did not feel like nothing. The next day, the first visible public crack hit mainstream news, and even then it was dressed in soft language. A member country announced it was temporarily suspending participation in integrated command exercises pending review. That is a big deal. That is not a scheduling issue. That is a country saying it is stepping back from the shared machine. The anchor who read it smiled, then immediately pivoted to a sports story. No questions, no panel, no follow-up. That was when I decided to talk. Not online, not in comments, out loud, on air, in a way that could be recorded and replayed without an algorithm burying it. I do not have a professional studio. I do not have a tower. I have a little setup I built for fun years ago. A low-power transmitter that can push a signal across a few miles if the weather is decent, and a simple antenna I can hide in a window. I used it sometimes to play music for myself in the garage. It is legal at low power where I am. I am not going to explain how to do it. I'm telling you what I did. Tonight I turned it on and I started talking because I wanted to put a human voice in the gap where official voices refuse to say anything real. If you're sitting somewhere listening, maybe in a car, maybe in a kitchen, maybe in a dark room with candles because your power is out, I want you to understand the shape of what happened. The fall of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization did not start with explosions on a beach. It started with language. It started with scripts. It started with leaders refusing to stand together on one stage. It started with agreements quietly reviewed and adjusted until the agreement meant nothing. It started with confusion on the operational level, with units getting conflicting orders, with pilots getting rerouted, with exercises disappearing from calendars. If you wait for the dramatic moment that proves it, you will miss the point. The dramatic moment is the end of the process, not the start. Here is another local thing I saw that week. A charter bus pulled into the airport parking area near the old cargo building. Not the terminal, the cargo building. The bus had tinted windows. A dozen people got out with backpacks, no luggage tags, no families waving goodbye, all adults, most men, a few women, all moving with purpose. 2 men carried hard cases that looked heavy. They walked toward a private jet that had been parked with a ground power unit running. I watched from a distance while pretending to check a tire on a cart. They boarded fast. The jet left within minutes. No announcements, no security line, no visible federal uniforms. Just a quiet movement of people, gear and fuel. I asked Pete the guard later if he knew what that was. Pete said he had been told to look the other way. He said the phrase, federal tasking. He looked miserable saying it. Then he told me something that made my skin crawl. He said someone higher up had asked security for a list of employees who monitor aviation communications and post analysis. Pete said he did not give names because he did not have a clear legal request. Pete said he expected a clear legal request soon. Around then, the public stories started diverging hard, depending on what country you were watching. One leader said everything was fine. Another said the alliance was evolving. Another said, national sovereignty will guide our next steps. Another blamed miscommunication and media hysteria. The only consistent thing was that none of them would say, in plain language, we are not honoring the agreement in the way you think. Nobody wanted to be the first to say it because being the first would trigger consequences. Markets, panic, political collapse, military moves, so everybody waited. And in the waiting, the agreement stopped being real. Mike called me again on a Friday. He sounded tired and angry. He said his unit finally got a single clean order after days of confusion. It told them to prepare for port security support and domestic continuity. Domestic continuity. That phrase hit my ear hard because it was not normal Coast Guard wording. Mike said the brief he got was vague. He said the main emphasis was infrastructure and public order. He said nobody in his chain wanted to talk about overseas commitments. He asked his officer directly if the alliance situation was affecting orders, and the officer told him, stop asking questions you do not want answered. I asked Mike if he thought war was coming. Mike did not answer right away. He finally said, I think fear is coming. That was Mike's word. Fear. He said leaders were scared of escalation, scared of being blamed, scared of being dragged into something they could not control. He said fear was pushing people to pull back and protect only their own borders. He said the alliance had always depended on trust, not paper. He said paper does not stop anything if trust is gone. The next day, there was a major cyber incident. I am not claiming it caused everything. I am saying it lined up with the timeline. Phone networks got weird. Calls would connect with no audio. Text messages would arrive hours late. Some people could not use debit cards at gas stations. The airport's internal scheduling system went down. We switched to handwritten lists taped to a wall. The news reported it as technical disruptions. The governor's office called it a network event. Nobody used the word attack. Nobody named a culprit. It was the same pattern, a hole in the middle of the story. At work, we started seeing more medical flights than normal. Not dramatic, not bodies, just more medevac landings, more small jets with medical crews. One paramedic I recognized from a prior winter medevac told me, quietly, that hospitals were being asked to prepare for surge capacity in case of civil disturbance. Civil disturbance. That phrase showed up everywhere. It was the official way to say, people might riot when the truth lands. By now I had enough material that I could lay it out cleanly. The identical scripts, the missing exercises, the unnamed Article 4 invocation, the separate leader appearances, the operational confusion, the unmarked cargo arrival, the bot flood, the cyber incident. None of those alone is the fall of an alliance. Together they form a picture of something coming apart while everyone tries to hold the smile on their face. I started recording my own timeline in audio form, not to post, just to have it in a human voice, because the text can be twisted and cut and posted out of context. Audio carries tone, audio carries hesitation. Audio carries fear. 2 nights ago I got the leak. It came through an email account I only use for the blog, an account I had not posted publicly in months. The subject line was blank. The message body was one sentence. Stop pretending you do not know. Attached was an audio file with no name, just a string of letters and numbers. I did not open it right away. I stared at it for 10 minutes with my finger hovering. I ran antivirus scans. I copied it onto the external drive first. Then I opened it on an old laptop that does not have my personal counts on it. The audio was noisy. It sounded recorded from a speaker in a room, not from a direct feed. I heard chairs, I heard paper, I heard a cough, then a voice. The voice was speaking English with a European accent I could not place. Not heavy, just enough to notice. The voice said the date and the session type. Closed meeting. Emergency. Then the voice said something that made my hands go cold on the keyboard. The voice said that one member state had requested consultations under Article 4 because of a grave incident. Then another voice interrupted and said, "Do not name it on this recording." Then the first voice said, "We need to decide what we say publicly." Somebody laughed, not because it was funny, but because people laugh when they are stressed. Then a different voice, deeper, said the sentence that matters. I'm going to play that sentence now. I want you to hear it. I want you to understand that it was not an external enemy that snapped the alliance in half in one moment. It was fear inside the room. Fear of what honoring the treaty would trigger. Fear of what refusing would admit. Fear of losing control of the story. I want you to hear the part where someone says the quiet truth out loud and then everyone else rushes to bury it. The sentence was, "We are not breaking from an enemy. We are breaking because none of us trusts the others to take the risk, and none of us will sign a promise that pulls our country into a war we cannot stop." Right after that sentence, there was a scramble of voices. Somebody said, "That cannot leave this room." Somebody said, "It already has." Somebody said, "Cut the interpreter feed." Then the audio clipped out. That was it. One sentence, then chaos, then silence. That one sentence explains the scripts, the smiles, the miscommunication line, the missing details, the bot floods, the careful maps, the review language. People in charge decided the alliance could not survive honesty, so they chose coordinated denial instead. Denial bought time. Denial also shredded trust. If you are listening and you still trust the official voices, I am not telling you to panic. Panic will get people hurt. I'm telling you to watch what disappears. Watch what gets postponed, then removed, then never mentioned again. Watch which leaders refuse joint appearances. Watch which questions get ignored. Watch for the same phrasing echoed across unrelated podiums. Watch for the sudden flood of clean, comforting content that does not match local reality. Watch for confusion at the operational level, conflicting orders, quiet reroutes, sudden restrictions that arrive with no explanation. Those are the real signals. I do not know who sent me the clip. I do not know if it was a staffer who got sick of lying, an interpreter who hit record out of fear, or someone inside who wanted chaos. I only know it showed up, and it matched everything I had been tracking for weeks. I also know what it means for people here in Maine who are just trying to get through a shift and pay rent. It means uncertainty. It means supply chains getting rerouted for priority needs. It means more pressure on ports and airports. It means more information warfare aimed at ordinary people to keep everyone confused and divided. It means more domestic continuity language and more quiet posture shifts that do not get explained. I keep thinking about my dad, who worked paper mills until his back gave out, and who always said alliances and treaties were a way to keep small countries from getting crushed. He believed in it in a plain way, not patriotic chest thumping, just belief that rules matter. I keep thinking about Aaron overseas, stuck in a city where trains are delayed and leaders keep smiling. I keep thinking about Mike getting 3 orders in one day and being told to stop asking questions. I keep thinking about Carla warning me with fear in her eyes because someone calm on the phone told her to shut me down. I keep thinking about the unmarked plane and those sealed cases moving under police escort in the rain. Those cases were not abstract. Those cases were real. Someone moved something important fast, quietly, and without public explanation. I'm going to tell you what happened after that thought landed in my head and refused to leave. The part nobody wants. The part where your body starts making decisions before your brain catches up. My mouth went dry and I realized I had been talking for a long time in a place that is never truly quiet. You always hear something at an airport. Fans, distant baggage belts, a truck backing up, a door slamming. Then I heard a sound that did not belong. Footsteps that were close, steady, not rushing, not casual. I stopped breathing for a second. That is not drama. That is just what my body did. I killed my own voice mid-sentence, the mic still hot, and I listened. The steps came closer. Then a knock. Not a friendly knock. Flat knuckles, firm, timed. 2 hits, a pause, then 2 more. Whoever it was did not want a conversation. Whoever it was wanted compliance. I am not brave. I need you to hear that. I do not have a hero bone. I have a stubborn bone, and I have a brain that hates unanswered questions. In that moment, stubborn took a back seat and survival drove. I reached down and cut the transmitter power. I did not yank cords. I did not drop gear. I moved slow because fast makes noise. I slid the mic under a box of worn-out safety cones and pushed the cable behind a shelf. I grabbed the external drive and shoved it into my pocket. I left the laptop open because closing it makes a sound. I moved to the corner where the shelves blocked the view from the door. The door handle rattled. The lock clicked. That means someone had a key. It was not a cleaner. The door opened into a strip of bright hallway light, and I saw a silhouette, shoulders squared, head turning. A voice said my name, not shouted. Said clean, calm, controlled. Joryn Pike. I stayed still and I did not answer. The voice came again. Joryn, come out. This does not need to be difficult. That last line is always a lie. Anytime somebody says that, difficulty already exists. I heard a second set of boots enter. 2 people at least. I'm going to admit something that will make me sound pathetic. My hands were shaking so hard I could feel it in my wrists. I clenched them and pushed my nails into my palms until it hurt, because pain is a handle you can grab. I looked around for an exit and there was none. Storage room, 1 door, no window. Just shelves and old equipment and the smell of chemicals. The first person walked deeper, the second stayed near the door. I could hear the first one breathing through his nose. Then he started moving boxes. Slow at first, testing, then faster. That is when I realized he was not searching randomly. He knew the room. He knew where people hide. He had done this before. I made a decision that still makes me sick. I stepped out before he found me. I raised my hands and I kept them visible. I said, I am right here. My voice sounded thin in my own ears. I hated it. 2 men looked at me. One wore airport security gear, the kind you see every day. The other did not. Plain dark jacket, no name tag, no visible badge. Clean hair, calm eyes. He looked at my face with the sort of focus you use when you want to memorize someone. The security guy did not look happy. He looked tense. The plain jacket man asked, "What are you doing in here?" He did not phrase it as a question you can answer. He phrased it as a door you either walk through or he pushes you through. I said I was taking a break. It was a weak lie and he knew it. He nodded once, slow, and said, "We received a report you have been transmitting." He did not say what. He did not say how. He said it the way you say the sky is blue. Then he looked at the shelves, then back at me, then said, "You are going to come with us." I asked if I was under arrest. I asked because that word matters. Arrest means rules. Arrest means paperwork. Arrest means a judge exists somewhere down the line. The man smiled without warmth and said, "No, we are going to clear up a misunderstanding." He nodded at the security guy, and the security guy moved closer, not touching me, but close enough that touching would be easy. I walked because I did not see another move that did not end with me slammed into a shelf. I kept my hands out of my pockets. I kept my face calm. Inside, my brain was sprinting. The external drive was in my pocket. If he patted me down, he would find it. If he found it, my archive would disappear. My only leverage would disappear. They took me out into a service corridor that smelled of hot rubber and exhaust. No passengers, no cameras I recognized. The plain jacket man guided me with his body, not his hands, steering me away from open areas. He had done this path before. We stopped at an office I had never been in. It had no window and the door had a keypad. The security guy punched a code and we went inside. Inside the office, there was a table, 2 chairs, and a third chair pushed against the wall, the kind of room used for complaints and write-ups. The plain jacket man sat down without asking. The security guy stood by the door. The man looked at me and said, "Sit." I sat. He asked me about my blog. He asked what I tracked. He asked who I talked to. He asked if I had contacts overseas. He asked if anyone paid me. He asked if I had posted classified information. The way he said classified told me he did not care whether I actually had. He cared whether the word scared me into shutting up. I answered in boring sentences. I said it was a hobby. I said I used public sources. I said nobody paid me. I said I did not have secret contacts. I said I listened to podcasts. I said I worked and went home. The truth wrapped in plain paper. He looked down at a folder on the table that I had not noticed at first. He opened it. He slid a printed screenshot toward me. It was my blog, not the front page, a specific post, the one where I lined up the identical statement phrasing across languages. He had highlighted lines with a marker. He tapped it and said, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Because it is happening." My voice came out sharper than I intended. The man watched me, then leaned back and said, "This is an airport. This is critical infrastructure. Do you understand the words critical infrastructure?" He paused and waited. I nodded once. He said, "People panic. People do stupid things. You do not want to be responsible for that." That line made me angry because it flipped the blame. He was saying the problem was me noticing, not the fact that the alliance was cracking and the public was being lied to. I held it in. I said, "I am not telling people to riot. I am telling people to pay attention." The security guy shifted his weight and looked away. The plain jacket man kept his eyes on me and said, "You are going to stop. You are going to delete your archives. You are going to sign a statement that you have not transmitted anything from airport property. You are going to return to work and keep your head down." I asked what happens if I do not. He shrugged, slow, and said, "You will lose your access. You will lose your job. You will be on a list. That is not a threat. That is a consequence." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, not a phone, a recorder. He set it on the table and pressed a button. Then he said, "State your full name and date of birth." This is the moment where I had to decide what matters. My job mattered. My rent mattered. Still, that external drive in my pocket mattered more because it held the only clean timeline I trusted. If I gave it up, the story would get rewritten by the same people who kept smiling on camera. I did something that was not smart but was real. I lied again. I gave my name, I gave my birthday, and I said I had not transmitted from airport property. That part was technically true, depending on how you define transmission. I had turned the transmitter on in a storage room. Yes. The signal did not go far, and I did not even know if anyone caught it. He was baiting me into admitting something he could use. I did not give it. Then he slid a paper toward me and a pen. I looked at the paper. It was a statement written in that clean legal voice people use to hide intent. It said I agreed to refrain from broadcasting, recording, or disseminating information regarding airport operations. It was broad. It was a muzzle. It was not about safety. It was about control. I did not sign it. I said I wanted to read it and I wanted my union rep. The security guy flinched at the word union. The plain jacket man's smile disappeared. He stared at me for a full 5 seconds and then he said, "Fine." He stood up, reached into the folder and pulled out a badge photo of me. He tapped it, then looked at the security guy and said, "Deactivate his secure area access until further notice." He said it with no emotion. Then he leaned close to me, close enough that I could smell his aftershave, and he said, "This is not your story to tell." Then he walked out. The security guy stayed behind and looked torn. Pete was not there. This was a different guard. Younger, eyes darting. He finally said, "Quiet. Just go home. Do not make this worse." I stood up, hands still shaking, and I walked out of the office, down the corridor, past vending machines, past locked doors, until I reached an employee exit. I went into the cold air, and I felt my lungs take a full breath again. I got into my car, and I sat there with my forehead against the steering wheel for a minute. I did not drive home right away. I pulled out my phone and I checked messages. Aaron had sent one line 8 hours earlier. "No trains, police at station, call later." Mike had not replied since his last call. I had a missed call from an unknown number. 2 missed calls. I drove to a grocery store on the edge of town because I needed my hands busy and I needed to see what the shelves looked like with my own eyes. The parking lot was full at 9 in the morning on a weekday. That is not normal. People were moving fast, carts squealing, faces tight. Inside, the store had that sound of stress, not loud, just constant. Too many voices at once. The bottled water aisle was stripped, bread mostly gone. Baby formula locked behind a counter with a handwritten sign that said Limit 1. The pharmacy line stretched into the cosmetics aisle. I grabbed what made sense and what I could carry. A couple jugs of water, rice, canned soup, peanut butter, batteries. A hand crank radio because my old one was flaky. I did not buy a mountain of stuff because hoarding makes you a target. It also makes you part of the problem. Still, I needed enough to survive a few days if the system hiccuped. At the register, a woman yelled at a cashier about limits. The cashier kept saying the same line, calm, robotic. "I'm sorry, ma'am, limit 1. The woman slammed her hand on the counter and said the government was lying about everything. Her kids started crying. A guy behind her told her to shut up. Another guy told him to mind his business. It turned into shoving. No punches, just bodies bumping and the voices rising. A manager showed up and tried to calm everyone down. People filmed it. This is what I mean by collapse through trust. No bombs, no tanks, just people who cannot agree on what is real, yelling over canned soup. I went back to my car and I saw 2 military cargo trucks on the road, headed toward the interstate. Not a parade, just moving. Covered loads. No markings I could read at speed. A police cruiser followed them at a distance. Nobody waved. Nobody smiled. Just motion. I drove home and I did the boring survival things. I charged everything. I filled my bathtub with water because my dad always did that before storms. I filled a couple containers. I checked my flashlight. I checked my door locks. I put my external drive in a small bag with my passport and my birth certificate and cash. Not because I planned to run, because I wanted the option. Then I turned on the news again and I watched the same smiling faces. Same careful words. Same refusal to say what people were clearly seeing in their own lives. One anchor talked about temporary supply disruptions, while a scrolling ticker at the bottom mentioned precautionary measures at major ports. Ports, that hit my ear because ports are lifelines. Maine relies on trucks and ports. If ports tighten, everything tightens. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered. A woman's voice said my name and asked if I was Joryn Pike. I asked who she was. She said a friend of a friend. Her voice was tight, controlled. She said she had something for me and she could not send it online. She said she would leave it in a specific place in Orono, behind a vending machine near a laundromat in a taped envelope. She said not to call back. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. Every part of my brain screamed trap. Every part of my brain also screamed opportunity. I waited an hour. I watched the street outside my apartment. I did not see the same sedan. I did not see anything that stood out. That does not mean anything. Still, I went because I could not go. I drove to Orono and parked across the street. I watched for 10 minutes. People came and went from the laundromat. Nothing strange. I crossed the street with my hands in my pockets, trying to look bored. I walked around the vending machine area and I saw the envelope taped to the back, tucked low, hidden from casual view. Brown paper, clear tape, no name. I took it and I walked away without opening it there. I got back in my car, locked the doors, and opened it on the passenger seat. Inside was a small flash drive and a printed page. The page had 3 timestamps and 3 short descriptions. 1, a call between 2 defense officials, one in Europe, one in North America, discussing limitations on mutual support. 2, an air traffic incident involving a military flight that was diverted and then lost contact. 3, a note that said, in plain words, the meeting clip is real. More exists. The reason is internal. There was also a warning at the bottom. Do not go to media. Media is contained. Record your own. I drove home with my jaw clenched. I did not plug the flash drive in yet. I did not trust it. I waited until I could use the old laptop again. When I finally opened it, it was audio. More of the same closed room tone, more chairs, more paper, different voices, different accents. Same fear. The first clip was short. A man said, "If you invoke Article 5, you must deliver. If you do not deliver, you end the alliance." Another voice said, "If we deliver, we risk escalation that becomes nuclear." Then someone said, "Then we cannot invoke." Then silence. Somebody exhaled hard. Another voice said, "Then we need a public narrative." Public narrative. That was the phrase that made me nauseous. It was not, we need to protect people. It was not, we need to prevent war. It was, we need a narrative. The second clip was more technical. Two people discussing air corridors and refueling. I caught one thing that made my stomach drop because it tied back to what I heard on open channels. One voice said, "Do not authorize tanker support on that track until we have written confirmation from all participants." Written confirmation. In a crisis, waiting for written confirmation is delay, dressed as caution. Delay kills operations. Delay also prevents commitments. The third clip was not a meeting. It sounded like a phone call between someone in a staff office and someone in a command post. One person said, "We have 3 countries refusing the same instruction." The other said, "Then the instruction is dead." I sat back in my chair and I realized I'd been assuming there was a single break. A dramatic moment. A betrayal. The truth was uglier. It was a slow refusal, country after country, leader after leader, all quietly deciding the risk was too high and all hoping someone else would take the blame for admitting it out loud. That night, the catastrophe finally touched the surface in a way even the smiling anchors could not fully hide. An emergency alert went out in parts of Europe. Not a war alert, a civil protection alert. It told people to conserve fuel, avoid unnecessary travel, and be prepared for disruptions to communications. It did not explain why. The clip of the alert showed up online in multiple languages. Some platforms labeled it misinformation. The alert was real. People in those cities confirmed it with photos of their phones. Erin called me. Her voice was clearer this time. She sounded exhausted. She said the station had armed police. She said the trains had stopped completely in her region. She said the government told people the delays were technical. She said people were sleeping on the floor in the station anyway, waiting for a departure that never came. She said rumors were spreading about border closures. She asked me if the United States was safe. I told her the truth. I told her, I do not know. Then I told her what I did know. I told her to stay with someone she trusted. I told her to keep her documents on her body. I told her to keep cash. I told her to avoid crowds if things got tense. I told her to charge her phone every chance. She asked me if she should try to get to an airport. I did not want to say no because saying no sounds like giving up. I did not want to say yes because airports become choke points the moment a country panics. I told her to wait 24 hours and watch for actual movement, not rumors. I told her to pick one option and commit, not bounce around chasing updates. I told her to listen for official updates from multiple sources and compare. She got quiet and then she said, "They are saying the alliance is stronger than ever." Her voice cracked on the word stronger. I wanted to throw something. I swallowed it and said, "Erin, do not trust the tone, trust the actions." After the call, I sat in the dark, and I made a list of decisions. Real decisions, not internet talk. I decided I would not go back to work until I had a union rep with me, because walking into that airport alone after the plane jacket man told me I would be on a list was stupid. I decided I would keep broadcasting, but not from the airport. I decided I would keep my archives in 2 places, not 1. I decided I would tell Mike what I had without sending files, because Mike's phone was not secure and I was not going to drag him into my mess more than I already had. I decided I would keep my car half-fueled at all times because gas lines form fast in panic. The next morning, Bangor woke up to a different kind of noise. Helicopters. Not one, several. High enough you could not see detail, but low enough you could hear rotor slap. The local radio said it was training. People posted videos anyway. The helicopters went toward the coast. They did not circle back for a long time. Mike finally texted me one line. "Cannot talk. Activated." I stared at that text until my eyes hurt. Activated means orders, gear, duty. It also means he could vanish into silence for days. It also means something serious is happening somewhere that requires bodies on posts. Around noon, I drove to a gas station to top off, and the line was already 10 cars deep. People were filling every container they could. Some were using proper gas cans. Some were using plastic storage bins. That is dangerous and stupid, and people do it anyway when fear takes over. The clerk put up a sign that said cash only because the card system was down. People argued. One guy yelled that it was a government plot. Another guy yelled that it was foreign sabotage. A third guy told both to shut up and move their cars. I waited in line and listened, because listening is what I do. One older man said his brother worked at a port in Portland and that the port had new security layers. He said trucks were being diverted. He said a ship had been held offshore for inspection for 12 hours longer than normal. Another woman said her husband drove long haul and his dispatcher told him certain routes were closed for coordination. That phrase again. Coordination. Everything was coordination. Coordination became the word used to cover paralysis. That evening, the markets dropped hard. I am not a finance guy. I do not watch stocks. You could feel it anyway. People started buying and selling in panic. Banks tightened. Employers sent messages about continuity planning. A friend from high school posted that his company froze overtime and travel. Another friend posted that her hospital canceled elective surgeries to preserve capacity. That is not a normal reaction to a rumor. That is a reaction to a briefing. I turned my transmitter on again that night from my apartment. Low power, same raw setup, and I started talking. I told the story of the office, the folder, the pressure. I told people to stay calm and stop fighting each other in grocery aisles. I told people to keep a few days of water and food because disruptions were already happening. I told people the biggest danger was rumor storms and that you need multiple sources. I did not tell people to do anything illegal. I did not tell people to hurt anyone. I told people to pay attention to reality and protect their families. Halfway through, my lights flickered. Not out, flicker. My internet dropped, then came back. My phone buzzed with a new alert from the utility company. We are aware of localized outages and are working to restore. Localized outages at the same time the whole world's communication is wobbling means you do not assume it is just a squirrel. I kept talking until the power dropped completely. Darkness. Refrigerator hum, dead. Heater dead. Street outside went quiet in a way that made my chest tighten. I stopped transmitting because my backup could not handle it long. I switched to battery and I listened instead. You can tell a lot from what you hear in a blackout. In my building, doors started opening. People stepped into the hallway. Someone shouted asking if anyone knew what happened. A baby cried. A dog barked. Then sirens, far away at first, then closer. Not a ton. Just enough to say something was going wrong somewhere. I went to the window and looked down at the street. Cars were turning around at an intersection because the traffic lights were out and nobody trusted the four-way stop system in the dark. A couple people had flashlights. One guy stood on the sidewalk with his phone up trying to find signal. The sky over town had that glow from emergency generators starting up in big buildings. My hand crank radio worked. It pulled in local stations running on backup. The announcer sounded tired. He said there was a regional power interruption affecting parts of Maine and New Hampshire. He said crews were working. He said no cause was known. He said people should stay home and avoid roads. He said emergency services were responding to a crash at an intersection. Then he moved on to a pre-recorded weather segment because there was nothing else he could safely say. I kept cranking and I pulled in a stronger station from farther away. That one was running a national feed. The national feed was talking about temporary grid anomalies. That was the phrase. Grid anomalies. No cause, no culprit, no explanation. The anchor smiled with his voice. He said everything was stable. That was the moment I stopped believing we were only watching an alliance collapse. We were watching a whole protection system collapse. The alliance is one part, the markets are another. The trust in institutions is another. The grid is another. When all of them wobble at once, you do not call it a coincidence. You call it a cascade. The power came back 3 hours later. Not clean. It surged. My lights brightened too hard, then dimmed, then stabilized. My fridge beeped. My phone exploded with delayed messages. One was from my union rep telling me he had heard something happened and asking me to call. One was from Aaron, sent earlier, arriving now. People fighting at station. Someone shot into air. I am leaving. I called her immediately. No answer. I called again. No answer. Then a text came through. Broken, short. On bus. Heading west. No city. No details. I felt helpless in a way that made my stomach hurt. Not theoretical helpless. Real helpless. I called Mike. Straight to voicemail. I did not leave a message. I did not want his phone logging my voice with panic. I texted him. Are you safe? Reply one word. Nothing. The next day, the airport shut down parts of operations. Not full closure, quiet restrictions, access changes. Some flights canceled, some delayed. The official reason was staffing and safety protocols. People in town started noticing military aircraft movements more because civilians were grounded. One photo went around showing a line of refueling aircraft at Bangor. Another showed a transport on the ramp. People argued online about what it meant. The bots returned, harder, flooding comment sections with false certainty. Carla called me. That surprised me because Carla does not call people off shift unless it is serious. She sounded strained. She asked where I was. I said home. She said, "Do not come in." I asked why. Carla swallowed and said, "There are federal people here. They are asking about you." I asked if she knew why. Carla said, "They said you are interfering with operations." That made me laugh once, a harsh little sound because I had been locked out of secure areas. I had no access. I was not interfering with anything except their comfort. Carla said, "I am warning you because I owe you that. Do not come in, do not call the office, do not email from your work account. Just stay away." I thanked her and hung up and sat still for a long time. Then I did the next real decision. I left my apartment. Not forever, not running to the woods. I left because staying in a known location while people with calm voices ask about you is dumb. I packed a bag. Clothes, water, food, flashlight, batteries, radio, external drive, old laptop, cash. I did not take my whole life. I took enough for a few days. I drove north, away from the town, toward a friend's cabin outside Lincoln. Not deep wilderness, just quiet. Less eyes, fewer cameras. On the way, I saw a convoy on the interstate. National Guard vehicles, a few heavy trucks, and civilian pickups mixed in. That mix told me it was a rushed mobilization. A police cruiser blocked an on-ramp while the convoy passed. People on the shoulder filmed it. Some cheered, some flipped them off, some just stared. At a rest stop, I saw a man yelling at a vending machine because it ate his money. That sounds stupid, but that is where people are now. Anger has nowhere to go, so it goes into whatever is in front of your face. I reached the cabin by late afternoon. It belonged to my friend Nate's uncle. Nate had a key and permission, and Nate trusted me enough to let me use it. Nate was not there. Nate texted me that he was staying with his girlfriend in town because her mom needed help. He told me to keep the place tidy and not burn it down. The cabin had a wood stove, a propane tank for a small heater, and a well pump that ran on electricity. That last part mattered. If the grid went down, the well pump was dead unless you had a generator. There was a small generator in the shed, old, loud, with a can of gas next to it. I checked it, started it for a minute, then shut it down. I did not want noise. Noise draws attention. I set up my gear on the kitchen table and I listened. I listened to local radio. I listened to distant stations. I listened to the bands that still carried voices. The pattern was the same everywhere. Vague language, calm tone, missing details. Then under that, real hints. Ports restricting movement, fuel ration discussions. Temporary measures for communications. Then I heard something that made my skin tighten. A coastal advisory. The announcer said the Coast Guard was responding to multiple incidents off the New England coast involving unidentified vessels and navigation interference. Navigation interference. That can mean jamming. That can mean spoofing. That can mean something big and ugly. It can also mean equipment failure. The announcer did not say. He just repeated the hotline number for mariners and told private boats to stay in harbor. I tried Mike again. Nothing. That night I did not sleep much. I sat by the window with the lights off and watched the tree line. I heard a truck pass on the distant road once an hour. The kind of steady traffic you can normally ignore. Now every engine sounded important. Just before dawn, I turned on the radio and I caught a breaking segment that was not supposed to exist. A reporter voice, breathless, said there had been an incident at a European airbase involving a confrontation between Allied personnel. Then the feed cut hard into music. Same clean cut. Same loop. Then back to an anchor who said there was no confirmed information and people should avoid speculation. That was the first time I heard the internal fear turn into internal violence. Not war with an external enemy. Allies arguing with allies. Pushing, maybe firing. People with guns and uniforms getting contradictory orders and deciding which orders mattered. That is the real nightmare. By midday, social media was full of shaky videos. Some were fake, some were real. You could tell the real ones because nobody in them knew the camera was telling a story. In one, you could hear shouting in a language I did not understand. Then the sound of rifle fire, then people running. In another, you could see a crowd outside a government building, police line, smoke, then an armored vehicle creeping forward. The bots worked overtime. Under every video, a flood of comments declared it was staged. Under every denial, a flood declared the opposite. The goal was not convincing you of one thing. The goal was making you tired of caring. I started broadcasting again from the cabin, low power, short bursts, because I did not know who could hear it. I did not pretend I was official. I said my name. I said I was a baggage handler. I said what I had seen and what I had archived. I said people should stop waiting for a perfect headline that confirms everything. I said the collapse is already in your life if you cannot buy formula, if you cannot trust your bank card, if your sister cannot get on a train, if your friend gets activated with no clear mission. I also said something I had been avoiding. I said the alliance did not die because it was attacked. It died because leaders were too scared to honor it, and too scared to admit they would not. That cowardice moved down the chain and became confusion, then conflict, then breakdown. I got a response. Not many. One. A man's voice, older, crackly, came through my receiver. He did not give a name. He said he was in Brewer. He said he heard me the previous night and he had something to add. He said his cousin worked at a trucking company that had been contracted for priority moves under federal authority. He said the company was told to move sealed pallets from a warehouse in Waterville to a secure site near the coast. He said the drivers were escorted and told to keep their mouths shut. He said one driver quit on the spot because it felt wrong. I asked him if he knew what was in the pallets. He said no. He said the paperwork was blank except for codes. He said the escort vehicles were not marked as federal, just plain SUVs. He said it felt designed to look local, not national. That detail hit my brain hard because it matched the unmarked plane and the local police escort. Someone was using local faces to keep people calm. If a big federal agency rolls in with visible badges, people talk. If local police do it quietly, people shrug. The man in Brewer said one more thing. He said the rumor among drivers was that the pallets were communications gear, backup systems, mobile units, something meant to keep certain channels alive if the grid and networks got unstable. He said it was not about defending the public. It was about keeping command able to talk to itself. I thanked him and told him to keep himself safe, and then his signal went quiet. Later that afternoon, I drove into Lincoln to get more gas because the cabin generator would need it for the well if the grid dropped again. The gas station had a handwritten sign, "Limit 10 gallons." People argued anyway. A woman tried to fill 5 cans. The attendant refused. The woman cried. Not a performance. Real crying. She said her dad needed oxygen and the machine needed power, and she was trying to get fuel for a generator. That is the kind of decision you face now. Do you bend the rule because someone is desperate, or do you enforce the rule because if you do not enforce it, the next person will take everything and the whole system breaks? The attendant looked sick with stress. He finally let her buy 2 cans, not 5, and he made her promise to leave. A guy behind her called her a liar. Another guy told him to shut his mouth. The attendant asked everyone to calm down. I paid cash. I kept my eyes down. I left. On the drive back, I saw smoke in the distance. Not forest fire smoke. Darker, thicker. I turned on the radio and heard that a substation near a town south of us had caught fire. No cause given. Crews responding. People asked to conserve electricity. Conserve electricity is a phrase you usually hear in heat waves. Hearing it during a global crisis felt different. It felt like a warning without the courage to be one. That night, I finally got a message from Mike. 1 sentence. On the water. Busy? Do not come south. I texted back asking if he was okay. No reply. Aaron sent another message. Delayed, arriving at midnight. Bus stopped at checkpoint. Men with rifles, not police. People scared. I tried calling. No answer. I stared at my phone until my eyes burned. I could not reach her. I could not help her. All I could do was keep talking so the story did not get buried. The next morning, the national feed finally said the words everyone had been avoiding, in the softest way possible. The anchor said, "Officials confirm that certain North Atlantic Treaty Organization coordination mechanisms are temporarily suspended while members conduct internal reviews." Temporarily suspended. Internal reviews. That was the official obituary. Not a funeral, not a flag lowering, just a soft, bureaucratic sentence that meant the promise was gone. Then, right after, the anchor smiled and said markets were expected to stabilize. Markets do not stabilize when a security structure collapses. That is not how people work. People hear that and they do two things. Some freeze, some rush. The rush causes shortages. The shortages cause anger. The anger causes violence. The rush hit within hours. Stores in Lincoln were slammed. The pharmacy ran out of certain medications. The grocery store posted a sign limiting diapers. A hardware store ran out of generators. The guy at the counter told the customer the next shipment was delayed due to routing. Routing. Another soft word. That afternoon, the first real confrontation happened in town. I did not see it on a screen. I saw it out a windshield. I was driving past a parking lot when I saw a crowd around a pickup truck. Two men were shouting. One man held a gas can. Another man grabbed it. A third man pushed. Somebody fell. Someone's head hit the pavement. Blood. Real blood. Not cinematic. A woman screamed. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Someone else yelled that ambulances were not coming because everything was chaos. I did not stop to film. I did not stop to watch. I drove away because crowds are magnets now. Crowds are danger. I called 911 anyway, because sometimes 911 still works. The dispatcher sounded exhausted. She asked where it happened. I told her. She said she would send someone if available. If available. Back at the cabin, I wrote down the time and the place. That is who I am. That night, the grid went down again, broader this time, not just flickers, full outage across multiple counties. The radio said the outage reached into parts of New Brunswick. The announcer tried to sound calm and failed. He said crews were working. He said people should not call 911 for power outages. He said conserve phone battery. He said check on neighbors. I started the generator for the well for 30 minutes, filled containers, then shut it down. The engine noise felt loud in the dark. I kept expecting headlights to swing down the driveway. None did. I sat in the dark with the radio and listened to distant voices. In the blackout, some frequencies carried farther. I caught fragments from farther south. Reports of fuel terminals restricting sales. Reports of ports closing. Reports of a violent incident in a city where people tried to force open a warehouse. Reports of National Guard deployed to support logistics. Then I caught a short clip from overseas that made my blood run cold. A leader, face pale, stood at a podium and said his country would no longer operate under alliance constraints. He said national defense would be handled independently. He did not name enemies. He did not name partners. He just said independent. That is the sound of everyone walking away from each other at once. The next morning, the power came back and my phone exploded with delayed news. There had been an incident at sea off the coast of Europe involving an Allied vessel and an unidentified drone boat. That is what one report said. Another report called it an accident. Another called it misinformation. The only confirmed fact was that ships collided and people died. The rest was buried in fog. Fog is what you get when nobody trusts anyone enough to share a clear report. I decided to go back toward Bangor anyway, not to return to work, to check on my apartment and to see if anyone had been there, to pick up more supplies, to get closer to information. Being isolated keeps you safe from crowds, but it also blinds you. I needed eyes on the ground in town. I drove south with my radio on and my windows cracked. The roads were busier than normal, more cars loaded with stuff, more people moving without clear reasons. I saw a line of cars outside a bank. People were trying to pull cash. The bank had a guard at the door and a sign that said limited withdrawals. A man in a suit argued with the guard. A woman behind him shouted that she needed money for insulin. Nobody cared about anyone else. Everyone cared about the hole under their own feet. Near Bangor, I saw military police vehicles I had never seen here before. Not local cops, not state troopers, real military police markings. That made my stomach drop because it meant the airport and the base side were under a tighter posture. I did not drive straight to my apartment. I parked a few blocks away and walked, watching for any vehicle that had been sitting too long. Paranoia is not fun. Paranoia is math when you have enough reasons. I reached my building and checked the hallway. Quiet. No signs of forced entry. My door looked normal. I unlocked it and stepped inside and my stomach flipped. Someone had been there. Not a burglary. Not a mess. It was worse because it was clean. A drawer I always keep shut was half open. My couch pillow was shifted. My closet door was not fully closed. Small signs, but I know my own space. Someone searched without wanting me to notice. That means a professional search or someone trying to act professional. I checked my laptop. Gone. The one I use daily. I checked my external backup drive that I kept at home. Gone. I stood there and felt a wave of anger so hot it made me dizzy. They did not take my television. They did not take my microwave. They took my archive. Then I remembered the external drive in my go bag. The one I had on me. The one with the meeting clips copied. That one was safe. The story was not fully erased. I did not stay. I grabbed a few things that still mattered and I left. On the way out, I saw Pete, the real security guy. He was in the parking lot talking to someone in a plain SUV. Pete looked tense. When he saw me, his eyes widened. He made a small motion with his hand, subtle, telling me to keep moving. I kept moving. My heart was pounding hard enough that my hearing narrowed. I got in my car and drove toward the outskirts of town and parked behind a closed business. I sat there shaking with anger and fear. Then my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. A man spoke, not the plain jacket man, different voice, older, gravelly. He said, "You need to stop." He said it in a tired way, almost regretful. He said, "You do not understand what you are stirring up." I asked who he was. He said, "Someone trying to keep this from getting worse." Then he said something that made my skin crawl. He said, "We know about the cabin." I did not reply. He continued. He said, "You have audio that you do not understand. You are going to get yourself hurt. If you care about your sister, you will stop." That was not a bluff. That was a knife placed on the table. I felt my throat tighten. I forced myself to speak. I said, "If you know where Erin is, help her." He paused. That pause was the first human thing he did. Then he said, "We do not have control over overseas movement. That is the problem." Then he hung up. I sat there staring at the dashboard and I realized something ugly. The people pressuring me were not confident. If they were confident, they would ignore me. If they were confident, they would laugh at a baggage handler talking into a mic. They were pressuring me because the truth is fragile right now, and one honest voice can crack the narrative they are using to hold things together. That means the narrative is all they have. I drove back north that same hour. I did not go to the cabin. I went to a different place first, a state park parking lot that stays quiet in winter. I pulled out my radio gear, set it up in the car, and I started transmitting again. I did it because if they were going to chase me, I wanted my voice out there before they put hands on me. I told people someone searched my apartment. I told people my work laptop was gone. I told people to assume information control was happening locally, not just on big networks. I told people to protect their documents, protect their medication, protect their ability to communicate with family. I told people the goal of bot floods and fake maps was making you either panic or sleep. I told people to choose neither. I also said something else, and I need you to hear this part because it is the most important realistic decision. I said, "Do not turn your neighbor into an enemy because you are scared. The alliance breaking overseas does not give you an excuse to beat a man in a parking lot over gasoline. The system is strained. You do not fix strain by tearing each other apart." I transmitted until my battery was low and then I stopped and I drove again. I headed toward the cabin, but I took back roads, not because I thought I was being followed by movie villains, but because I did not want to pass through choke points where police were starting to set up traffic control for the blackout days. I saw one checkpoint on a county road, 2 cruisers and a deputy waving cars through slowly. I turned before it and took a logging road that was plowed enough to pass. When I got back to the cabin, something felt wrong before I even stepped out. The snow by the shed had new tire tracks. Not mine. Narrower. A different tread pattern. My stomach dropped. I killed my headlights and sat in the dark, listening. No voices, no engine, just winter silence. I waited 10 minutes. Then I got out and walked slow, keeping to the side, using trees for cover because I did not know who was there. I reached the cabin window and looked inside. The curtain had been moved a fraction. Someone had looked out. My chest tightened. I backed away and I went around to the shed first. The padlock on the shed door was cut. Clean cut. Bolt cutters. The generator was gone. The gas can was gone. That was not a random thief. That was someone removing my ability to run the well in a blackout. That was a message. I did not go inside the cabin. I left. I got back in my car and drove without headlights down the driveway until I reached the road, then turned them on and kept going. I drove to Nate's place in town because I needed a human who knew me, and because I needed a safer plan than sitting in a cabin that had been touched. Nate answered the door with a baseball bat in his hand. He looked embarrassed when he saw me, but he did not put it down right away. That tells you how people are now. He let me in. His girlfriend's mom was sitting on the couch with a blanket and an oxygen concentrator that was running on a small battery pack. Nate whispered that they had a generator too, but fuel was getting hard. I told Nate. Someone hit the cabin. Nate swore under his breath and said he had seen unfamiliar trucks on the road the last 2 nights, slow, scanning. He said people were starting to steal generators out of sheds. He said a neighbor had his propane tank cut and taken. He said the sheriff told folks to stay alert. Stay alert means you are on your own. I did not sleep there that night either. I stayed up and helped Nate plan boring things. Where to keep fuel, how to keep noise down, how to keep the oxygen device running if the grid dropped. That is what crisis is. Not speeches, not flags. It is a mom on oxygen, and a couple guys trying to keep her alive while the world shakes. In the middle of the night, the radio broke into an emergency bulletin. A large fire at a fuel depot in southern Maine. The announcer said the cause was unknown. He said local authorities were responding. He said residents should avoid the area. Then he stopped and you could hear him swallow. He said, "This will impact fuel availability." There it was. One depot fire and the whole region tightens. People will fight harder now. Police will get more stressed. Hospitals will struggle. Deliveries will slow. At dawn, I got a call from Erin. Somehow it went through. Her voice was faint, cutting. She said she had gotten off the bus near a border because the checkpoint stopped them. She said men in mismatched uniforms were directing traffic. She said some people were pulled off the bus for questioning. She said she kept her head down, and she walked away with a small group into a town she did not know. She said she found a church shelter where volunteers were handing out tea. She said she was safe for the moment. I asked where she was. She hesitated, then said the name of the nearest big city. A real place. She sounded scared saying it, because naming your location feels dangerous now. I told her to keep moving only if she had a clear plan, not because of panic. I told her to find other Americans if possible, not because Americans are better, but because consular channels might still prioritize citizens in a breakdown. She laughed once, bitter, and said, "Consular channels are closed." Then she said something that made me go cold. She said a rumor at the shelter was that some airports were being used only for military and government evacuation, not civilians. She said a friend of a friend tried to get to a commercial terminal and found it locked with armed guards. She said the guards told them to go home. That is when it hit me that my sister might not get back for a long time. Not because planes cannot fly. Planes can fly because priorities change when governments panic and civilians fall off the list. After the call, I went outside Nate's place and I looked at the sky. Clear, cold air. No contrails. Usually you see a few. Not today. The air felt empty. That empty sky was louder than any headline. I decided to do something risky and simple. I decided to push the audio clips out wider than my little local signal without using big platforms that could be choked. I cannot tell you how to do that. I am not giving instructions. I am telling you what I did in human terms. I handed copies to people I trusted. Physical copies. Old-fashioned. I gave Nate one sealed envelope with a flash drive and a printed timeline. I gave another to my union rep through a friend, not the union rep directly, because I did not want him dragged in without choice. I gave one to a pastor in town who ran a food pantry, because pastors talk to everyone and pastors know how to keep things safe without turning it into a circus. If you are listening, that is a decision you might face too. Digital channels are fragile. Physical handoffs are slow, but harder to erase. The week that followed was the worst I have ever seen in my life, and I grew up in Maine, where winter can kill you in quiet ways. This was different. This was human systems breaking. Fuel shortages hit hard. The depot fire meant deliveries were rationed. Some gas stations ran dry. Others had lines that wrapped around blocks. Fights got worse. Police got overwhelmed. Hospitals started turning away non-critical cases because staffing dropped. Some nurses quit because they could not get childcare. Some doctors slept at the hospital because they feared roads. The grid kept hiccuping. Not full collapse, but rolling outages that moved across counties. Utilities asked people to conserve electricity and avoid charging electric vehicles during peak hours. People with electric heat got scared. People with wood stoves became local heroes for neighbors. Schools closed, not for snow, for operational safety. Businesses shortened hours. Some closed entirely. Pharmacies started limiting controlled meds, and some people screamed at pharmacists because screaming is the only power some people know. There were also acts of kindness that kept me from losing my mind completely. A neighbor sharing firewood. A mechanic checking an elderly man's generator for free. A teenager helping carry groceries for a woman who looked ready to collapse. That stuff still exists, it just gets buried under the noise. Then the catastrophe that everyone feared finally hit the coast. Mike's unit was involved. I know because Mike finally sent a voice message, short, rough, recorded in wind. He said there had been multiple distress calls from fishing boats that lost navigation and radio at the same time. He said the Coast Guard responded and found boats drifting, crews shaken, some injured. He said one boat had a burn mark on the cabin roof, and nobody could explain it. He said the sea was full of rumors about drones and interference. He said he could not confirm any of it. He said he had not slept in 30 hours. Then he said, "Joryn, stop talking on air, please." His voice cracked on please. That was not an order. That was a friend begging because he was scared for me. I sat with that message for a long time. Stopping would keep me safer. Stopping would also mean letting the narrative win. I made a compromise. I kept talking, but I changed what I talked about. I stopped focusing on the meeting clips for a while, and I focused on practical reality and local truth, because that is harder to label as misinformation. I talked about outages. I talked about fuel lines. I talked about not fighting over diapers. I talked about checking on neighbors. I talked about keeping a paper list of important numbers. I talked about the fact that panic turns into injury fast. Still, I could not keep the Alliance collapse out entirely because it was the route. People kept asking, why is this happening? Why did the depot fire matter so much? Why are ships being held? Why are planes not flying? The answer is the trust framework is gone. The system that coordinated big responses is cracked. When that cracks, everything gets slower, more selfish, more chaotic. One night, I was broadcasting from Nate's garage with the door shut and blankets hung to dampen sound. I was mid-sentence when I heard a vehicle outside, slow, tires crunching on gravel. Then headlights swept across the garage door seams. Nate froze. I froze. We both stopped breathing. The vehicle idled. Then it rolled forward and stopped. A door opened. Footsteps on gravel. Nate mouthed, "Stop." I killed the transmitter. We stood in the dark with only the red glow of a battery charger. The footsteps came closer to the garage door. Then a knock. One knock. A pause. Another knock. Nate picked up his bat. I held my hands up, telling him no. I did not want Nate swinging at a stranger and starting a chain that ends with someone dead in a driveway. I moved to a side window and peeked him through a gap in the curtain. I saw a man, alone, wearing a dark jacket, hands visible, no weapon visible. He was not the plain jacket man from the airport. Different build, different posture. This man looked tired and cold. He leaned toward the door and said, "Quiet, Joryn. I do not want to hurt you. I need to talk." Nate looked at me with panic in his eyes. I shook my head. I did not open the door. I spoke through it. Instead, I said, "Who are you?" The man said, "My name is Alan. I work with Airport Authority Security, not the guards, the real side. I heard your broadcasts. I know you are not trying to cause riots. I also know people are looking for you." I asked why he was here. Alan said, "Because I do not like what I am seeing. Because we are being told to do things with no paperwork. Because I have a kid. Because I think you are right about the narrative." Nate whispered, "It is a trap." He was probably right. I told Alan to step back from the door and put his hands on the hood of his car in the light. Alan did it. That was a human move. People running a trap do not usually obey small humiliations. I told Alan to talk. He said he was not alone in being disturbed. He said airport staff had been instructed to report anyone recording unusual arrivals. He said the plainclothes people were not a single agency. He said it was a task force made of pieces. He said nobody wanted to own it publicly. He said that was deliberate because if no agency owns it, nobody can file a complaint to the right place. He said the unmarked plane I saw was not the only one. He said there had been multiple arrivals with sealed cases. He said one shipment included mobile satellite gear and radio repeaters. He said the goal was maintaining command communications if civilian networks degraded. He said they are planning for domestic continuity, not alliance continuity. That line hit hard. Domestic continuity. That phrase again. It was now the skeleton key for everything. Alan said something else that made my blood run cold. He said the airport authority had received a directive to prepare for civilian surge evacuation constraints. That means civilian evacuation might be restricted, not because planes cannot fly, because the system does not want masses moving. Mass movement creates panic. It also creates witnesses. I asked Alan why he told me this. Alan hesitated, then said, "Because you are recording reality, and reality is being stripped out of the story." I did not invite him inside. I told him to leave whatever he came to give and go. Alan said he had a printed list of tail numbers and dates. He said he could slide it under the door. I told him to do it, and then leave with his hands visible. He did. A sheet of paper scraped under the door. Then I watched him walk backward to his car, get in, and drive away slow. Nate and I waited 10 minutes before picking up the paper. On it were several aircraft tail numbers, date, and time windows, and one note: Bangor is a hub now. I cross-checked the tail numbers against what I could access. Some were clean government registrations. Some were masked behind leasing companies. Some had histories connected to defense contractors. Not proof of evil, proof of planning. Proof that resources were being moved while the public was told nothing. The next day, I got a call from my union rep. He sounded shaken. He said someone from airport authority had called him and warned him to keep his people under control. He said he had never heard that tone before. He said he did not know what to do. He asked me what I had done. I told him the truth. I told him I had talked on air. I told him I had seen sealed cases. I told him I believed the alliance collapse was being hidden behind scripted statements. There was a long silence. Then my union rep said, "This is bigger than a grievance." Yes, that is the point. It is bigger than everything normal. That is why the old tools do not work. That week, the first official domestic restrictions arrived in Maine. Not martial law, not tanks at every corner, soft restrictions. A curfew recommended in some towns. Police checkpoints for safety in others. Travel advisories telling people to avoid coastal areas at night. A ban on certain hazardous cargo moving without escorts. Every restriction came wrapped in soft language. Recommended, voluntary, for safety, temporary. People who have lived through disasters know temporary can stretch until it becomes normal. The hardest part was watching people split into camps. Some believed every official word and attacked anyone who questioned it. Some believed every rumor and attacked anyone who asked for evidence. Both groups were being played. The middle ground shrank. The middle ground is where society lives. I kept broadcasting when I could. Short, careful, grounded. I read my timeline. I read the meeting sentence again, not every day, but enough that it stayed alive. I read the new tail numbers and dates, not as accusations, but as facts. I said, this arrived, this departed, this happened. Facts are harder to drown than opinions. Then, the biggest catastrophe so far hit overseas, and it came back here through the only channel that still connected everyone: fear. A major European capital saw a mass protest turn violent after a fuel ration announcement. Police clashed with crowds. Government buildings got stormed. Troops appeared in streets. Flights were grounded. Borders tightened. The news showed controlled angles and called it unrest. People online posted wider angles and called it collapse. Aaron texted me one line that night: "Shelter closed, volunteers gone, I am walking." I texted back, begging for location. No reply. That is when I broke for a minute, not screaming, not sobbing. I went into the bathroom at Nate's place, and I sat on the floor, and I pressed my forehead against the wall, and I felt helpless rage. I wanted to fly over there and drag her home and punch every smiling anchor in the face. None of that was possible. All I could do was keep my head clear and keep the story alive and keep the people around me from turning into monsters. I came out of the bathroom and Nate's girlfriend's mom was watching me. She did not ask questions. She just held out a cup of instant coffee with shaking hands. That was her way of saying, "I see you." I took it, and I nodded. And that cup of coffee did more for me than any official statement. 2 days later, Erin finally called again. Her voice sounded older. Not because time passed, because fear ages you. She said she had reached a smaller town where a family let her sleep in a spare room. She said the family had a son in the military and they were scared too. She said roads were being controlled by different groups depending on the region, some official, some not. She said there were rumors of clashes between police and military units in some places, not because of ideology, because of conflicting orders. Conflicting orders, the same disease everywhere. She asked me if she should risk moving toward a major airport. I told her the truth again. I said airports might be locked down. I said she might get trapped in a crowd. I said she might get labeled a problem. I said her best chance was finding a consulate route or an organized evacuation, but she already told me those were closed. I told her the safest move might be staying put with a family she trusts until a clear corridor opens. I hated saying it. She hated hearing it. Then she said something that punched the air out of me. She said, "Joryn, people are saying America is going to pull back completely. People are saying allies are done. People are saying we are on our own." I told her we are not on our own in the human sense. People still help people. Governments might pull back. That is the truth. Still, you are not alone if you stay near decent humans. After the call, I went back to the garage and I turned the transmitter on again, and I spoke into the mic with my hands steady for the first time in days. I said my sister was overseas and I could not reach her reliably. I said that is what global crisis looks like, not missiles on your street, just a phone that does not connect when you need it. I said if you have family abroad, stop assuming the system will rescue them. Start thinking about real options. Contacts, trusted locals, safe shelter. That broadcast spread farther than I expected. Not because my signal was stronger, but because people repeated it mouth to mouth. The next day, a stranger approached Nate's girlfriend in a grocery store and asked if she knew the radio guy. She came home pale and told me. That meant people were listening. It also meant the wrong people could be listening. So I made another decision. I moved again. I stopped using Nate's place for broadcasts. I did not want to put his family at risk. I chose a location with less personal collateral. A place people pass through. A place with noise that covers you. A place with exits. I started broadcasting from my car in different spots, never the same 2 nights. Shorter transmissions. More local practical truth. Less explosive content. Still, I kept the core sentence alive. I kept repeating the idea that the alliance broke from internal fear, not external attack. That matters because it changes how you understand everything. When you think an enemy did it, you look outward. When you understand fear did it, you look inward at your own leaders, your own institutions, your own willingness to tell the truth. You also look inward at yourself and ask what you will do when fear tries to make you cruel. The last big turn happened 3 weeks after the first emergency session announcement. It was a Sunday. I remember because Sundays used to be quiet. That day, Bangor was not quiet. Sirens, helicopters, a steady rumble of heavy vehicles. People posted that the airport had a major incident. The official story said there had been a security event that required temporary lockdown. No details, just safety language. Alan texted me from a burner number, one line, "Do not go near airport, shots fired, not public." Shots fired at the airport. That is not normal. That is a bright line. I drove toward a ridge where you can see distant runway lights at night from far enough away to stay out of the perimeter. I did not go close. I parked and watched. I saw vehicles moving on the far side. I saw a line of lights that looked like a convoy. I heard distant pops that might have been gunfire or might have been something else. Then I saw something I will not forget. A large transport aircraft lifted off in a steep climb, heavier than normal, engines screaming, and it climbed out fast into low clouds. 10 minutes later, another followed. Even from far away, you can feel urgency in a takeoff. That felt urgent. That felt rushed. I turned on the radio and heard the official local station saying, "There is no threat to the public." That is the phrase you hear when there is absolutely a threat to the public, but officials are trying to prevent panic. In the next hour, I heard snippets on open channels that confirmed it was not a drill. A pilot asked for clearance and got a sharp response. Another asked for reroute and got denied. Then silence. More silence. The next day, the story that leaked out was that a group tried to breach a restricted cargo area. Some said it was thieves. Some said it was protesters. Some said it was insiders. The official story blamed criminal elements exploiting instability. That might be true. It might also be a convenient cover. The only thing I trust is the outcome. Shots were fired at a major airport during a time of global crisis, and then heavy aircraft departed fast. That is not normal security. That is crisis movement. That night, I broadcast the last thing I could safely broadcast without getting someone killed. I said Bangor is a hub. I said shipments are moving. I said security incidents are happening. I said the public is being fed soft language while hard decisions happen behind fences. I said you do not have to riot. You do not have to panic. You do have to plan for disruption, and you do have to stop trusting smiling tones. Then I said something personal. I said I miss my dad. I said my dad believed rules matter. I said I grew up thinking grown-ups in suits would tell the truth when it counted. I said I was wrong. I said the truth is now carried by tired people on night shifts, by nurses, by truckers, by reservists on the water, by a sister sleeping on a stranger's couch overseas. I said if you want a society to survive, you protect those people, not the narrative. After that broadcast, I went quiet for a while. Not because I gave up. Because I realized the next phase of this crisis was not about information. It was about movement. People and goods moving in panic, borders tightening, ports closing. Local groups forming to protect neighborhoods, others forming to exploit. In Bangor, you started seeing neighborhood watch groups that were not official. Some were harmless, some were aggressive, some had good intentions and bad judgment. A few guys started stopping cars on their street to check if you belong. That is how bad things start. Nate told me he saw a fight outside the hardware store where a man accused another of being a foreign agent because the man had an accent. That accusation ended with a broken nose and a police car that took 40 minutes to arrive. That is how fragile everything is now. Mike finally called me late one night. His voice sounded raw. He said the Coast Guard was stretched thin. He said distress calls were constant. He said ports were on edge. He said there were rumors of sabotage. He said he could not confirm any of it. He said one of his friends got hurt during a boarding because the crew resisted, terrified of being seized. He said people were turning desperate on the water too. I told him about my apartment being searched and the cabin being hit. Mike went quiet, and then he said, "You are in it now." I said, "I did not choose it." Mike said, "Yes, you did. You chose to see." He told me something that scared me more than any meeting clip. He said his unit got a new directive. Prioritize protection of domestic infrastructure and do not engage in actions that could trigger international escalation. That phrase told me everything. It told me even the Coast Guard, even the basic safety services were being shaped by fear of larger conflict. It told me the whole machine was pulling inward. After the call, I sat in my car in a dark parking lot and I made another decision. I decided the story was not only the fall of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization anymore. The story was the fall of shared responsibility. The story was what happens when everyone decides the risk is too high and steps back, leaving ordinary people to handle consequences. I'm still talking now, because some part of me believes words can slow violence, not stop it, slow it. If you can get one guy to put down a gas can and back up, you save someone's skull from pavement. If you can get one family to share a generator schedule with a neighbor who needs oxygen, you saved a life. If you can get one person to ignore a bot comment telling him to go burn something, you kept a street from turning into a war zone. I do not know how this ends. I do not know if Aaron gets home. I do not know if Mike gets to rest. I do not know if Bangor stays calm. I do know the alliance is gone in the way people believed it existed, and I know the truth of that was hidden behind identical scripts with identical pauses. I know the same fear that broke that alliance is now moving through towns and families, trying to make people cruel. So here is my last real decision for tonight, the one I am making while my hands are steady. I'm going to keep recording, even if I cannot broadcast, even if I have to whisper into a phone and save it to a drive, even if I have to hand it to someone in a taped envelope behind a vending machine. I'm going to keep a record of what was said, and what was done, and what was stolen, and what was denied.